The coffee stain on her oversized sweater was deliberate, as was the messy bun that looked like a bird's nest perched precariously on top of her head. Jennifer Walsh studied her reflection in the full-length mirror of her cramped apartment, satisfied with the disaster staring back at her. Thick-rimmed glasses that weren't even her prescription sat crooked on her nose, and she'd chosen her rattiest jeans, the ones with the hole in the knee that had nothing to do with fashion and everything to do with an unfortunate encounter with a rusty fence 3 years ago. Her best friend Monica had set up this blind date, and Jennifer had every intention of making sure it would be their last attempt at playing matchmaker. "You look like you got dressed in the dark during an earthquake," Jennifer muttered to herself, applying another layer of the wrong shade of lipstick. Perfect. This mystery man Monica kept gushing about would take one look at her and run for the hills. That was exactly what she wanted. For the past 5 years, Jennifer had built walls so high around her heart that not even the most determined climber could scale them. She'd learned her lesson about romance, about trust, about believing in fairy tales. Some lessons cost more than others, and hers had cost her everything. The restaurant Monica had chosen was far too fancy for Jennifer's carefully constructed appearance. The Meridian was known for its crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and clientele who wore more on their wrists than Jennifer made in 6 months as a graphic designer. She'd argued against the location, suggesting a casual diner instead, but Monica had been insistent. "Trust me, Jen. This guy is worth the effort. He's successful, kind, and he specifically asked for somewhere nice. That alone should have been a red flag." Jennifer didn't do nice anymore. Nice led to expectations. Expectations led to vulnerability. And vulnerability led to the kind of pain that left scars invisible to everyone but yourself. The maitre d' gave her appearance a barely concealed look of disapproval as she shuffled through the entrance in her worn sneakers. She'd left her only pair of heels at home, naturally. "Reservation for Walsh," she said, her voice flat. The man's expression shifted to something resembling professional courtesy, though his eyes betrayed his judgment. "Ah, yes. Your party is already seated. Follow me, please." Her party. As if this was some kind of celebration instead of an elaborate escape plan. Jennifer followed him through the maze of elegant tables, aware of the curious glances from other diners. She kept her eyes down, counting the seconds until she could make her excuses and leave. The maitre d' stopped at a corner table, partially hidden by an ornate privacy screen. "Your table, madam." Jennifer looked up, preparing her rehearsed apology about a sudden migraine, and felt the world tilt sideways. The man rising from his chair, his hand extended in greeting, wore a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than her car. His dark hair was perfectly styled, with just a touch of gray at the temples that hadn't been there before. Those piercing blue eyes she'd once thought she'd spend forever staring into, widened in recognition at the exact moment her breath caught in her throat. "Jennifer?" His voice was deeper than she remembered, but it still had that quality that used to make her name sound like music. The shock on his face was genuine, and for a split second, she saw something else there too. Pain? Regret? She couldn't tell, and she reminded herself she didn't care. This couldn't be happening. Not him. Not after 5 years of carefully rebuilding herself. Not after she'd finally started to feel like a whole person again, instead of the shattered pieces he'd left behind. Andrew. She forced the word out past the sudden tightness in her chest. Andrew Mitchell. The man who'd promised her the world and then disappeared from her life without explanation, leaving only a brief, impersonal text message that had destroyed her. The man who'd made her believe in love, and then taught her why she shouldn't. And apparently, according to the sleek designer watch on his wrist, and the air of wealth that surrounded him like expensive cologne, he'd done quite well for himself in the intervening years. He was staring at her outfit now, confusion replacing the shock. She saw him take in the coffee-stained sweater, the disheveled hair, the crooked glasses. Something flickered across his face. Was that amusement? The nerve. Jennifer felt heat rising to her cheeks, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her flustered. She'd dressed this way on purpose, just not for him. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd worn armor to this date, just a different kind than she would have chosen if she'd known she'd be facing the one person who'd already proven he could wound her. "Please sit down," Andrew said, gesturing to the chair across from him. His voice had that careful neutrality of someone trying very hard to sound casual. "I had no idea Monica's friend was you. She never mentioned your last name, just kept saying I absolutely had to meet this amazing graphic designer she knew." He paused, and something vulnerable crossed his features. If I'd known, I would have... He stopped himself, seeming to think better of whatever he'd been about to say. Jennifer remained standing, her mind racing. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around and walk out. She didn't owe him anything, least of all her time. But curiosity, that dangerous, persistent thing, held her in place. What was Andrew Mitchell doing in her city? Last she'd heard through the painful grapevine of mutual acquaintances, he'd moved to London for some business opportunity. And why had Monica set them up? Her friend knew about Andrew, knew what he'd done, even if she didn't know all the details. Jennifer had made sure very few people knew all the details. I should go, Jennifer said, but her feet didn't move. Andrew's expression shifted to something almost desperate. Please, just give me 10 minutes. If you want to leave after that, I'll understand. But there are things I need to tell you, things I should have said 5 years ago. His hand was still extended, not in greeting anymore, but in supplication. Please, Jennifer. She'd imagined this moment countless times in the early days after he'd left. She'd rehearsed speeches, planned cutting remarks, envisioned the satisfaction of telling him exactly what his abandonment had cost her. But now, faced with the reality of him sitting there in his expensive suit, looking at her with those eyes that still had the power to make her feel things she didn't want to feel, all her carefully prepared words evaporated. Instead, she found herself sitting down, her hands gripping the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. A waiter appeared with impeccable timing, presenting menus with a flourish. Andrew ordered wine without asking her preference, a Chateau Margaux that she knew cost more than her monthly rent. Some things never changed. He'd always had expensive tastes, though back then he'd hidden it well, claiming the nice restaurants and thoughtful gifts were just because he'd saved up. She'd believed him. She'd believed everything. I'm not drinking, Jennifer said flatly when the waiter looked at her expectantly. Just water. Tap is fine. Andrew waited until the waiter left before speaking. You look... He seemed to struggle for words. Different. Jennifer barked out a laugh that held no humor. That's one way to put it. I believe the word you're looking for is terrible. Don't worry, it's intentional. I wasn't exactly planning on impressing anyone tonight. She paused, letting that sink in. Especially not you. The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but she didn't take them back. He flinched, and she felt a small, bitter satisfaction at finally landing a blow after all this time. I deserve that, Andrew said quietly. I deserve much worse than that, actually. Jennifer, I know nothing I say can excuse what I did. How I left, the way I left. He leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. But I need you to know it wasn't because of anything you did. It wasn't because I didn't care. It was the opposite. I cared too much, and I was too much of a coward to... He stopped again, frustration evident in the tightness around his eyes. I'm doing this badly. I've practiced this conversation 1,000 times, and now that you're here, everything I planned to say sounds inadequate. Jennifer wanted to interrupt, to tell him she didn't care about his explanations, but something made her stay silent. Maybe it was the way his hands were trembling slightly, or the fact that he looked genuinely distressed. Or maybe, despite everything, despite the walls and the armor and the 5 years of moving on, a part of her still needed to understand why. Why he'd told her he loved her one day, and vanished the next. Why he'd made plans for their future, and then erased himself from her present without a trace. Why she'd mattered so little that he couldn't even give her a proper goodbye. The waiter returned with Andrew's wine and her water. The interruption seemed to give Andrew a moment to collect himself. When he spoke again, his voice was steadier. 5 years ago, I lied to you about who I was. Not about my feelings, those were real. But about everything else. My name isn't Andrew Mitchell. Well, it is. But it's also Andrew Hastings. I'm Andrew Hastings. Jennifer stared at him blankly. The name meant nothing to her. Andrew seemed to realize this and continued, his words coming faster now. Hastings Industries. My family owns it. We're one of the largest commercial real estate developers on the East Coast. My father is Richard Hastings, and when we met 5 years ago, I was trying to escape all of that. I wanted to be normal, to meet someone who liked me for me, not for my last name or my bank account. The pieces started falling into place with sickening clarity. The occasional expensive gift he'd explained away, the way he'd always been vague about his family, the sudden disappearance that had made no sense. You're a billionaire, Jennifer said slowly, the words tasting strange in her mouth. You were a billionaire then, pretending to be some regular guy working in marketing. Yes, Andrew admitted, and the shame in his voice was palpable. And 5 years ago, my father found out about you. About us. He didn't approve. He had other plans for who I should marry. Someone from our social circle. Someone who could benefit the business. When I refused, he gave me an ultimatum. He paused, his jaw clenching. I made the wrong choice, Jennifer. I thought I was protecting you from the mess my life was about to become, but all I did was hurt you in the worst possible way. And I've regretted it every single day since. Jennifer sat frozen, her mind struggling to process what Andrew had just revealed. A billionaire. Andrew Hastings. She'd spent 5 years creating elaborate explanations for why he'd left. Maybe he'd met someone else. Maybe she hadn't been good enough. Maybe he'd simply gotten bored. Never once had she imagined it was because his father disapproved of her. The thought was almost laughable, except nothing about this situation was funny. She took a long sip of her water, buying herself time to think, to feel, to decide how to respond to this bomb he'd just dropped into her carefully reconstructed life. So let me get this straight, Jennifer said finally, her voice carefully controlled. You dated me under false pretenses, made me fall in love with you, promised me a future, and then when Daddy said I wasn't good enough for the family empire, you just... what? Sent a text message saying it was over and blocked my number? The anger she'd been suppressing for 5 years bubbled up, hot and righteous. You couldn't even give me a phone call? A face-to-face conversation? You let me think I'd done something wrong, that I was somehow lacking, when really you were just too weak to stand up to your father? Andrew's face had gone pale. I know how it sounds. I know how it was. Jennifer, I was 26 years old, and I'd spent my entire life being groomed to take over the company. My father had a plan for everything. My education, my career path, even who I should marry. When I met you at that art gallery opening, you were like this breath of fresh air. You didn't care about business deals or social standing. You talked about design and creativity and following your passion. You made me want to be brave enough to choose my own path. But you weren't brave enough, Jennifer interjected, her voice cutting. You chose the money and the company and whatever poor woman your father picked out for you. She felt tears threatening and blinked them back furiously. She would not cry in front of him, not now, not ever. She'd cried enough tears over Andrew Hastings to fill an ocean, and she was done drowning in her own grief. I didn't marry her, Andrew said quickly. Caroline Bradford, that was her name. Daughter of one of my father's business partners. We were supposed to have this merger marriage, combining 2 fortunes. I broke up with you, thinking I was doing the right thing, protecting you from being dragged through the mud by my father's PR machine. He had investigators looking into your background, Jennifer. He was prepared to destroy your reputation, your career, anything to get you out of my life. I thought if I just ended things cleanly, he'd leave you alone. Jennifer laughed bitterly. How noble of you. So you sacrificed our relationship to protect me from your father's wrath. Did it ever occur to you to tell me what was happening? To let me make my own choices about what I was willing to face? Or did you just assume I was too fragile to handle the truth? She leaned forward, her eyes blazing. I spent months thinking I'd imagined our entire relationship. My friends staged an intervention because they thought I was having a breakdown. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on work. I nearly lost my job. But sure, you were protecting me. The waiter approached to take their order, but Andrew waved him away without looking. His attention was completely focused on Jennifer, and she could see genuine anguish in his expression. Good. She wanted him to hurt. She wanted him to feel even a fraction of what she'd endured. You're right, he said quietly. I should have told you. I should have fought harder. I should have done 1,000 things differently. After I broke things off, my father insisted I propose to Caroline within the month. We had this elaborate engagement party, all our family's friends and business associates. It was supposed to seal the deal. How romantic, Jennifer said dryly, but something in Andrew's expression made her pause. There was more to this story, she could tell. He was building up to something, another revelation that would probably turn her understanding of the past 5 years upside down yet again. She both wanted and dreaded to hear it. Andrew took a long drink of his wine before continuing. The night before the wedding, yes, I actually made it all the way to the wedding day. I was in my hotel room, putting on my tuxedo, and I just couldn't do it. I kept thinking about you, about the way you laughed at my terrible jokes. about how you'd get so absorbed in your design work that you'd forget to eat, about the time we got caught in that rainstorm in Central Park, and instead of complaining, you started dancing in the puddles. His voice had softened with the memory, and Jennifer felt her chest tighten despite herself. I called off the wedding, Andrew said, and Jennifer's eyes widened. 2 hours before the ceremony. 300 guests, a venue that cost more than most people's houses, and I walked into my father's suite and told him I couldn't marry Caroline, that I wouldn't marry her, that I was done living my life according to his plans. He smiled, but it was edged with pain. He disowned me on the spot, cut me off completely, said if I walked away from Caroline, I was walking away from the family, the business, everything. Jennifer found herself leaning forward despite her determination to remain detached. What did you do? The question came out before she could stop it, and she cursed herself for showing interest, for giving him even that small opening. But she couldn't help it. The idea of Andrew, who'd always seemed so concerned with doing the right thing for his family, actually standing up to his father, it didn't fit with the man who'd abandoned her via text message. I walked away, Andrew said simply. I had some money in a personal account. Nothing compared to the family fortune, but enough. I moved to London and started over, built my own company from scratch, sustainable housing development, nothing like my father's commercial empire. I wanted to prove I could make it on my own, without the Hastings name behind me. It took 4 years, but I did it. We're smaller than Hastings Industries, but we're profitable, and we're doing work that actually matters. Congratulations, Jennifer said, but her tone lacked conviction. Her anger was still there, still burning, but confusion was creeping in around the edges. If he'd walked away from his family, if he'd started over, why hadn't he come back to her? Why had he let 5 years pass? So you became a self-made billionaire. Good for you. But that doesn't explain why you're here now. Why you agreed to this blind date. Why Monica thought we'd be a good match. Andrew set down his wine glass with deliberate care. I moved back to the States 3 months ago. Opened an office here. And yes, I reached out to Monica deliberately. She and I met at a charity function. My company donated to the youth arts program she runs. We got to talking, and I asked about you. Not obviously, just casual questions. She mentioned she had this friend who was an amazing graphic designer but refused to date anyone seriously. When she described you, I knew it was you, so I asked her to set us up. You manipulated her, Jennifer said, fresh anger flaring. You used her to get to me. Does she even know who you really are? Does she know what you did? The betrayal stung double now, not just Andrew's deception, but the fact that Monica had unwittingly become part of it. Her best friend, who'd spent years trying to help her move on, who'd finally convinced her to try dating again, had led her straight back to the source of her heartbreak. She knows everything, Andrew said, and Jennifer's mouth fell open. I told her the whole story 2 weeks ago, after she agreed to set us up. I wanted to be honest with her, even if I couldn't be with you yet. She was furious at first. I think she threatened to do something very creative with my anatomy if I hurt you again. But then I explained why I needed to see you, what I wanted to say, and she agreed to help me, on one condition, that I would tell you everything tonight, and if you wanted nothing to do with me after that, I would never contact you again. Jennifer felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. Monica knew. Monica had known Andrew would be here, had known exactly what she was sending Jennifer into. Her best friend, who'd helped her pick up the pieces after Andrew left, had orchestrated this entire encounter. I need to talk to her, Jennifer said, reaching for her phone. I need to understand why she would— Wait, Andrew interrupted, his hand moving toward hers before stopping short, not quite touching. Please, there's more. There's something else I need to tell you. Something I should have said 5 years ago. Something that might help you understand why I've been trying so hard to find my way back to you. He took a deep breath, and Jennifer saw his hands shake as he clasped them together. When my father's investigators were digging into your background, they found something. Something you'd never told me. Jennifer's blood ran cold. There was only one thing from her past she'd kept hidden. One piece of her history she'd been planning to share with Andrew before everything fell apart. What are you talking about? She asked, but her voice came out barely above a whisper. She knew. Somehow she already knew what he was about to say, and the knowledge filled her with a complicated mixture of dread and something that felt dangerously close to hope. Andrew's eyes met hers, and she saw tears gathering there. Your mother. The investigator's report included everything about your family. I know she died when you were 12. I know she struggled with addiction, that you spent years in foster care, that you put yourself through design school working 3 jobs. I know all the things you carried alone, all the pain you never shared, and it made me realize how badly I'd failed you. Because you'd survived all of that. You'd built this incredible life for yourself despite everything, and then I came along and broke you all over again. The tears Jennifer had been fighting finally broke through. She'd never told Andrew about her childhood, about the years of instability and fear, about watching her mother's slow decline. She'd wanted to present herself as someone whole and stable, someone worthy of his love. The irony of it, both of them hiding their true selves, both of them afraid of being rejected for who they really were, would have been poetic if it wasn't so devastating. You had no right, she whispered. That was my story to tell. I know, Andrew said, his voice thick with emotion. I know, and I'm sorry, but Jennifer, it also made me understand something crucial. My father wanted me to marry Caroline because she came from the right family, because the merger made business sense. But you are the strongest, most resilient, most remarkable person I've ever met. You're everything that matters, everything real. And I was too stupid and too scared to fight for you when it counted. Jennifer wiped at her tears with the back of her hand, smearing what little makeup she'd deliberately applied badly. The waiter approached again, took one look at the emotional scene unfolding at their table, and quickly retreated. She needed to process this, all of it. The revelations about Andrew's family, his broken engagement, his knowledge of her past, Monica's involvement. It was too much. And yet, underneath the anger and the hurt and the confusion, she felt something else stirring, something dangerous and familiar and terrifying. Why now? She asked finally. Why come back after 5 years? You built your own life, proved yourself, became successful without your family's help. You could have anyone. Why track me down? Why set up this elaborate blind date? What do you possibly think could happen here? Andrew looked at her with such raw honesty that it took her breath away. Because I never stopped loving you, he said simply. Because every deal I closed, every building I designed, every success I had, none of it meant anything because you weren't there to share it with. Because I've dated other people, tried to move on, and nobody else has ever come close to making me feel what you made me feel. Because I'm hoping, his voice cracked slightly, I'm hoping that maybe, just maybe, if I grovel enough and prove myself enough, you might give me a second chance. Jennifer stared at Andrew, his words echoing in her mind like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. He loved her. Still loved her. After 5 years, after everything, he was sitting there in his expensive suit, vulnerable and honest in a way he'd never been before, asking for something she'd sworn she'd never give anyone again, a chance to hurt her. She opened her mouth, then closed it, unsure of what to say, what to feel, whether to laugh or scream or simply walk away and never look back. You can't just show up and say that, she finally managed, her voice shaking. You can't disappear from someone's life, let them spend years healing, and then waltz back in declaring your eternal love. That's not how this works. That's not fair. But even as she said it, she felt the walls she'd built so carefully beginning to crack. Not crumble, not yet, but definitely crack. And that terrified her more than anything else. Andrew nodded slowly. You're right. It's not fair. Nothing about this is fair, least of all to you. But Jennifer, I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight. I'm not asking you to jump back into anything. I'm just asking for the opportunity to prove that I'm not the same coward who ran away 5 years ago. I'm asking for the chance to show you that I've grown, that I've learned, that I'm finally the man I should have been back then. A waiter, a different one this time, clearly braver or more oblivious, appeared with menus again. Are we ready to order? He asked cheerfully. Jennifer almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Here they were, discussing the wreckage of their past and the possibility of a future, and this man wanted to know if they'd decided between the salmon and the steak. I'm not hungry, she said, but Andrew was already ordering. The pan-seared sea bass for himself, and without asking, the mushroom risotto for her favorite dish. He'd remembered. You remembered, Jennifer said after the waiter left. And she hated how soft her voice sounded, how that one small gesture had somehow pierced through her armor, more effectively than all his apologies and explanations. Andrew's expression softened. I remember everything, Jennifer. The way you'd bite your lower lip when you were concentrating, how you'd argue passionately for pineapple on pizza even though everyone said it was wrong. The sound of your laugh when something genuinely surprised you. I remember all of it because I couldn't forget even when I tried. Jennifer felt her resolve wavering dangerously. She needed to regain control of this conversation, of her emotions, of the situation that was spiraling away from her careful planning. Let's say, hypothetically, that I don't immediately throw this water in your face and storm out. Let's say I'm crazy enough to consider listening to whatever else you have to say. What exactly are you proposing here? A do-over? A second chance at the relationship you destroyed? Because I'm not that same naive girl anymore, Andrew. I don't believe in fairy tales, and I sure as hell don't trust easily. Good, Andrew said, surprising her. You shouldn't trust easily, and I don't want the naive girl you think you were. Though for the record, you were never naive, just hopeful, and there's a difference. I want to know the woman you are now. The one who dressed like a disaster to scare off a blind date. The one who survived foster care and put herself through school and built a successful career. The one who's strong enough to sit here and tell me exactly how much I hurt her instead of pretending it doesn't matter. Their food arrived, and for a few minutes they ate in silence. Jennifer had to admit, the risotto was perfect, creamy and rich with just the right amount of parmesan. She hated that Andrew had chosen well, that he still knew her tastes, that 5 years hadn't erased the small intimacies they'd once shared. She watched him eat his sea bass with the same careful precision she remembered, and felt a pang of something she didn't want to name. Tell me about your life, Andrew said suddenly. The past 5 years. What have you been doing besides building walls and designing graphics? There was genuine curiosity in his voice, and Jennifer found herself answering despite her better judgment. Maybe it was the wine Andrew kept trying to pour for her that she kept refusing. Maybe it was exhaustion from holding all her emotions in check, or maybe, just maybe, a tiny part of her wanted him to see who she'd become without him. I started my own freelance business 2 years ago, she said, pushing risotto around her plate. After you left, I threw myself into work. Stayed late every night, took on every project, anything to not think about what had happened. My boss noticed, promoted me to senior designer, but then I realized I was just running, not healing, so I started therapy. She glanced up to see Andrew's reaction. Yes, therapy, because I needed help processing what losing you did to me, and I'm not ashamed of that. I never thought you should be ashamed, Andrew said quietly. I think that's incredibly brave, braver than anything I did. He paused, seeming to struggle with something. I went to therapy too. After I called off the wedding, after I moved to London, I needed to understand why I'd made such catastrophic choices, why I'd let fear dictate my life. It helped me see a lot of things clearly, including how badly I'd handled everything with you. Jennifer took a sip of water, considering this. The image of Andrew Hastings, billionaire heir, sitting in a therapist's office confronting his demons, was almost impossible to reconcile with the man who'd sent her that cold, impersonal breakup text. But people changed, didn't they? She'd changed. Maybe he had too. What else? She asked. What else happened in those 5 years? Andrew set down his fork, his expression becoming more animated. I built something I'm proud of. Hastings Sustainable Solutions. Yes, I kept my family name because at that point I'd earned the right to it on my own terms. We develop affordable housing using green technology. I have a team of 40 people now, projects in 6 cities. Last month we completed a community in Manchester that provides homes for families who were previously living in substandard conditions. It's not about the money anymore. It's about making a difference. That's... Jennifer paused, surprised by the genuine admiration she felt. That's actually really amazing, so different from your father's business. She'd looked up Hastings Industries once, in the dark early days after the breakup. Commercial developments, luxury high-rises, the kind of real estate that catered to the wealthy. What Andrew was describing sounded like the opposite of that world. That was the point, Andrew said with a slight smile. I wanted to prove I didn't need to follow in his footsteps, and I wanted to do work that actually mattered, that helped people instead of just making money. My father called me an idealistic fool when I told him my plans. Said I'd be bankrupt within a year. His smile widened. We're now in talks to expand into the US market. And before you ask, no, I haven't spoken to my father since the day he disowned me. My mother calls occasionally, in secret. She says he's too proud to admit he was wrong. But she's seen the articles about my company. She thinks he's grudgingly impressed, though he'd never say so. Jennifer found herself leaning forward, drawn into his story despite herself. Do you miss it? Your family? The relationship you had before? It was a genuine question. She knew what it was like to lose family, though her loss had been different. Death and circumstance rather than choice. But loss was still loss, and she wondered if Andrew had truly processed what his decisions had cost him. Sometimes, Andrew admitted. I miss my mother. I miss my younger sister Claire. She was only 16 when everything happened, and my father wouldn't let her have any contact with me. She's 21 now, finishing college, and I don't even really know her anymore. His voice held real grief, and Jennifer felt an unexpected surge of empathy. But I don't miss the pressure, the expectations, the constant judgment, and I don't regret standing up to my father, even if I regret that it took me so long to do it. The restaurant was filling up around them, the dinner crowd arriving in waves of designer clothes and expensive jewelry. Jennifer became aware again of her deliberately terrible outfit, but somehow it didn't matter as much anymore. Andrew wasn't looking at her clothes. He was looking at her, really looking at her, in a way that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. It was disconcerting and comforting all at once. I need to ask you something, Jennifer said, setting down her fork. And I need you to be completely honest. Why the blind date setup? If you wanted to see me, if you wanted to apologize, why not just contact me directly? Why involve Monica? Why all the subterfuge? This had been bothering her since he'd admitted to orchestrating the meeting. It felt manipulative, like he was still hiding things, still not being fully direct. Andrew's expression turned sheepish. Because I was terrified you'd refuse to see me if you knew it was me. I thought if I could just get you to sit down with me, if I could explain face to face, I'd have a better chance than a phone call you'd hang up on, or an email you'd delete. I know it was manipulative. Monica told me it was a terrible idea, actually. But I was desperate, and desperate people don't always make the best choices. No, Jennifer said dryly. They don't. Case in point, 5 years ago. She regretted the words as soon as they left her mouth. She was trying to move past the constant jabs, trying to hear what he was saying, but the hurt kept bubbling up, demanding acknowledgement. Sorry. That was true, Andrew interrupted. That was true. And you have every right to keep bringing it up. I shattered your trust, Jennifer. I know that doesn't get repaired with one dinner and a series of explanations. If it gets repaired at all, it's going to take time and effort, and me proving over and over again that I'm not going to run away when things get difficult. He leaned forward, his expression intense. But I want to try. I want that chance. And if you give it to me, I promise you won't regret it. Jennifer felt her phone buzz in her pocket. Probably Monica, checking to see if she'd murdered Andrew yet, or vice versa. She ignored it. You're asking for a lot, she said slowly. You're asking me to risk everything I've spent 5 years protecting, my heart, my peace, my sanity. That's not a small thing. She took a breath, feeling like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to jump without knowing if there was water below or rocks. But I'm going to ask you to do something for me first. Anything, Andrew said immediately, and she almost smiled at his eagerness. Almost. I want complete transparency, Jennifer said. No more secrets, no more half-truths, no more protecting me from uncomfortable realities. If we're going to even consider exploring whatever this could be, I need to know everything about your business, your life, your family situation. I need access to the real you, not the version you think I want to see. Can you do that? Andrew didn't hesitate. Yes. Absolutely. Yes. In fact, he pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and slid it across the table to her. That's my calendar. Every meeting, every commitment, completely open to you. And this, he pulled out his wallet and extracted a business card, writing something on the back. That's my assistant's direct line, my office address, my personal email. You can verify anything I tell you anytime you want. I have nothing to hide from you anymore, Jennifer. Nothing. She stared at the phone and the card, surprised by the gesture. It was more than she'd expected, more vulnerability than she'd thought he was capable of showing. Maybe he really had changed. Or maybe he was just very good at saying what she wanted to hear. Time would tell. Time. and whether he could actually follow through on all these promises he was making in the romantic ambiance of an expensive restaurant. "There's something else you should know," Andrew said, his voice dropping lower. "My father reached out to me last week. First time in 5 years. He wants to meet. Says he has a business proposition. I don't know what it is, but I have a suspicion it involves his company and mine. And I want you to know, whatever he's planning, whatever he offers, it won't change anything. I won't let him manipulate me again. I won't let him anywhere near you." His jaw clenched. "He took 5 years from us. He doesn't get to take anything more." Jennifer's heart stuttered at Andrew's words. His father was back in the picture, circling like a shark that had scented blood in the water. The man who'd orchestrated their separation 5 years ago now wanted something from his estranged son. She should have felt afraid, or angry, or protective of the fragile understanding she and Andrew were building across this table. Instead, she felt something unexpected, curiosity about what Andrew would do, about whether he'd truly stand firm or crumble under family pressure again. "When are you meeting him?" she asked, watching Andrew's face carefully. This felt like a test, though she hadn't planned it that way. His answer, his body language, his willingness to include her in this decision. It would tell her everything she needed to know about whether he'd really changed, or if this was just another performance. "I haven't agreed to meet him yet," Andrew said, his eyes never leaving hers. "I wanted to talk to you first. Because whatever happens with my father, whatever business proposition he's dangling, it affects you too. If we're going to try to rebuild something between us, I need to know you're comfortable with however I handle him. Your voice matters here, Jennifer. It should have mattered 5 years ago." Jennifer sat back, genuinely shocked. The Andrew she'd known before would have compartmentalized, kept his family drama separate from their relationship, made decisions without consulting her because he thought he was protecting her. This version, offering her agency in how he dealt with his father, was radically different. "I think you should meet him," she said finally, and saw surprise flicker across Andrew's face. "But not alone. And not without knowing exactly what you want from the conversation." "You think I should hear him out?" Andrew seemed genuinely puzzled, as if he'd expected her to tell him to refuse all contact with his father forever. Jennifer shrugged, feeling more confident now, more in control of the situation than she had all evening. "I think your father doesn't do anything without a calculated reason. If he's reaching out after 5 years of silence, there's something he wants badly enough to swallow his pride. Wouldn't you like to know what that is? Knowledge is power, Andrew, and this time, you'll be walking in with your eyes open." Andrew's expression shifted to something like admiration. "You're right. You're absolutely right. God, I'd forgotten how sharp you are. How you could always see angles I'd missed." He pulled his phone back across the table, his fingers moving quickly. "I'll set up the meeting for next week. My lawyer will be present." "And Jennifer?" He looked up at her, his expression serious. "I'd like you to be there too. Not in the room necessarily, but nearby. I want you to see how I handle him. I want you to witness that I'm not that scared 26-year-old anymore." "That's a lot of pressure to put on one meeting," Jennifer said. But she was smiling slightly despite herself. The idea of facing Richard Hastings, the man whose machinations had derailed her life, held a certain appeal. Not for revenge. She was surprised to realize she didn't want revenge anymore, but for closure, for the chance to show him that she'd survived his worst efforts and emerged stronger. "But okay. I'll be there." The waiter returned to clear their plates, asking about dessert with the persistence of someone working for tips. Andrew ordered the chocolate soufflé without consulting her, and Jennifer raised an eyebrow. "Still making assumptions about what I want?" she teased, and was rewarded with Andrew's sheepish grin. "Old habits. Though I'm hoping some old habits are worth keeping. You always did have a weakness for chocolate." "Guilty?" Jennifer admitted. The tension that had strung tight between them all evening was finally easing, shifting into something that felt almost comfortable, almost like the easy companionship they'd once shared before everything had gone wrong. She found herself studying Andrew's face, noting the new lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair. He'd aged well, though that wasn't surprising. Money and good genetics had a way of preserving people, but there was something else too, a groundedness that hadn't been there before. A sense of someone who'd been tested and survived. "Can I ask you something personal?" Andrew said as they waited for dessert. "When you dressed like that tonight," he gestured vaguely at her outfit. "Were you trying to sabotage all your blind dates, or was it just tonight?" There was no judgment in his voice, only genuine curiosity, and maybe a hint of amusement. Jennifer felt heat rise to her cheeks but forced herself to answer honestly. All of them, she admitted. Monica's been setting me up for 6 months now. Every single time, I've found creative ways to ensure the guy wouldn't call back. Wrong clothes, terrible conversation topics, pretending to be obsessed with bizarre hobbies. One guy I told I was training to be a competitive eater. Another, I spent the entire date discussing my extensive collection of vintage dental equipment. She laughed at the memory, at the horrified expression on that particular date's face. I didn't want to risk feeling anything for anyone. It was easier to just be alone. But you came tonight, Andrew pointed out. Despite your sabotage outfit, you still showed up. Monica must be very persuasive. The souffle arrived, perfectly risen and dusted with powdered sugar. They both reached for spoons, and their hands brushed. The contact sent electricity through Jennifer's arm, and from Andrew's sharp intake of breath, he'd felt it too. Some things apparently didn't fade with time or distance or heartbreak. She is, Jennifer agreed, pulling her hand back and focusing intently on her dessert. She told me this guy was different, that he'd specifically asked to meet me, that she had a good feeling about it. I thought she was just being optimistic like always. I had no idea she was setting me up with you. She paused, taking a bite of souffle. It melted on her tongue, rich and perfect. I'm still not sure if I should thank her or kill her. Maybe both, Andrew suggested, and Jennifer found herself laughing, really laughing, for the first time all evening. It felt good, like releasing pressure that had been building for years. Andrew was laughing too, and for just a moment, she could see them as they'd been, young and happy, and full of hope for the future. The moment passed, but it left something warm in its wake. Possibility, maybe, or just the memory of what possibility had once felt like. So what happens now? Jennifer asked when they'd finished the souffle. When the waiter had brought the check and Andrew had paid it with a black credit card that probably had no limit. We can't just pick up where we left off. Too much has happened. Too much time has passed. But I'm not ready to say goodbye forever either. The admission cost her something, made her feel vulnerable in a way she'd sworn she'd never be again. But it was also honest, and if Andrew wanted transparency, he'd have to accept her honesty, even when it was messy and complicated. Andrew stood, coming around to pull out her chair, a gentlemanly gesture she'd forgotten he used to do. What happens now is we take it slow. We start over, properly this time. No secrets, no lies, no father-mandated obstacles. I'd like to take you to dinner again. Somewhere you actually choose this time. And maybe you could dress however you actually want to dress, not like you're trying to scare me away. He smiled, and it transformed his face, made him look younger and more hopeful. Though, for the record, I'd still want to see you again, even if you showed up in a burlap sack. They walked out of the restaurant together, into the cool evening air. The city stretched around them, full of lights and life and endless possibilities. Jennifer pulled out her phone, seeing a dozen texts from Monica, ranging from concerned to panicked to weirdly enthusiastic. She'd deal with her friend later. Right now, she needed to focus on the man standing beside her, the one who'd broken her heart and was now asking for the chance to mend it. I'm not promising anything, Jennifer said, turning to face Andrew. I'm not saying this will work or that we'll end up together. I'm just saying I'm willing to try. To see if the man you've become and the woman I've become can build something new. Something better than what we had before. Because we're both finally being honest about who we really are. She took a deep breath. But Andrew, if you hurt me again, if you run away or let your father manipulate you or make decisions without me, I'm done. No third chances. Understand? I understand, Andrew said solemnly. And Jennifer, I won't hurt you again. I'll spend however long it takes proving that to you. He hesitated, then slowly, carefully, reached for her hand. This time she let him take it, let their fingers intertwine. His hand was warm and familiar, and felt like coming home after a very long journey. Can I drive you back to your apartment? I promise I remember where you live. Monica didn't tell me, but I might have driven by a few times over the past few weeks, hoping to see you. That's slightly stalkerish, Jennifer said, but she was smiling. But yes, you can drive me home. And Andrew, next time I'll wear something nice. Not because I'm trying to impress you, but because I want to. Because maybe, just maybe, this disaster of a blind date turned out to be exactly what I needed. She squeezed his hand, feeling something in her chest that had been frozen for 5 years finally begin to thaw. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once, this feeling of hope returning after she'd thought it was gone forever. As they walked toward Andrew's car, a sleek but understated hybrid, she noticed, very different from the flashy sports cars his father's circle would drive. Jennifer realized that sometimes the worst moments led to the best ones. Sometimes you had to dress ugly and face your past to discover your future. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person who broke your heart was the only one who could teach you how to be brave enough to risk it again.